We continue our study of Genesis, and we are entering into chapter 27 of the book of Genesis. And what we're about to see described for us in this chapter is a very tragic chain of events by any measuring stick. Inspiration of the Bible does not hold back on the negative characteristics as well as the positive characteristics of the main characters, with very, very few exceptions. Joseph perhaps being one exception, even though I contend that there is even a negative aspect of Joseph that's brought out early in that story once we get there. But still, you have overwhelmingly the characters that are presented to us are shown warts and all. And here we find this very thing described by Moses in this chapter. It begins, "Now it came about when Isaac was old, and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called his older son Esau, and said to him, 'My son.' And he said to him, 'Here I am.' Isaac said, 'Behold now, I am old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your gear, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare a savory dish for me such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die.'" He's telling his oldest son, the time has come near for me to pass. He knows he's about to die. And he says, the time has come for you to receive the blessing. Now, to our 21st century minds, we think, okay, he's going to bless him. Well, what's the big deal? It was a very, very big deal in the ancient Near East. When the patriarch of a family blessed the oldest son, it carried with it legal ramifications. It carried with it spiritual ramifications. It was a huge thing. And everybody in the family knew it, except perhaps Esau. Maybe Esau at this point realized the importance of it. But we saw already how that he had sold his birthright for a bowl of food. So he despised his birthright, as Moses tells us. And now we see this incident coming up. He's telling him, I may die soon. He knows he's about to pass. And he's going to bless the oldest son. Now, as we see this thing play out in this chapter, it's going to be very clear that no party in this family tragedy is free from fault. And what is being described here by Moses is indeed a family tragedy. And you're going to see the heartbreak on all sides as it continues. Rebekah was listening while Isaac spoke to his son Esau. We're not told where she was. Perhaps she was behind a curtain. Perhaps she was in another section of the tent. She was at a place where Jacob would not realize that she was overhearing the conversation. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game to bring home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Behold, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau, saying, 'Bring me some game and prepare a savory dish for me, that I may eat and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, listen to me as I command you.'" Look at this. Look at this. Rebekah's favorite is Jacob. Isaac's favorite is Esau. Notice the dynamic that's playing out here. Isaac tells Esau, "Go, hunt, bring some food, I'll bless you." And what does Rebekah do? She calls her son in and says, "Now listen, you got to do this for me. Listen to what I'm about to tell you." Jacob is obviously a mama's boy. Nothing wrong with being a mama's boy, but he was a mama's boy to a fault here. Notice this. "Go now to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats from there, that I may prepare them as a savory dish for your father, such as he loves." Her culinary skills are very evident here. Rebekah knows exactly what her husband likes to eat. She knows exactly how to fix the food just like he likes it. And so he's telling Jacob, you get involved in this, and I'll take care of the food. You don't worry about the food, I'll take care of it. She's crafty, as we see. Then you shall bring it to your father that he may eat, so that he may bless you before his death. Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Sometimes, you hear the phrase TMI, too much information. That's almost too much information that Moses puts in here. But it's very critical to the story as we're going to see it play out. Perhaps my father will feel me, then I will be as a deceiver in his sight, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. But his mother said to him, Your curse be on me, my son. Notice that. Your curse be on me. What's she saying? She's saying, let me be the one to be condemned. You let me worry about that. You see what she's doing? She's manipulating the situation here. She continues, Only obey my voice and go. Get them for me. So he went and got them and brought them to his mother. And his mother made savory food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her elder son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. Now what does this tell me? This tells me that Jacob and Esau were of similar stature. Because if Jacob could not wear Esau's clothes, they'd be hanging off of him. But apparently Jacob and Esau had a similar physical build as far as their size is concerned. So she gets the clothes that Esau wore, puts them on Jacob. Now watch this. And she put the skins of the young goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. She's covering all the bases. She's covering everything. She's making sure that if Isaac reaches out to touch Jacob, that he's going to feel hair. He's going to feel hair on his neck. He's going to feel hair on his hands. He's going to seem to Isaac, who is now blind, that this indeed is Esau. She also gave the savory food and the bread which she had made to her son Jacob. So she includes bread with that food. Now that's very common. Bread being used to sop up, as we often will do with biscuits and gravy and bread. They will sop up the remains of the food that they eat. And so she knows exactly what her husband likes. Then he came to his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am. Who are you, my son? Who are you? Already there's some suspicion there. Isaac is suspicious. He's expecting Esau, and all of a sudden, this person comes in and doesn't sound like him. Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. That's a lie. He's telling a lie. I have done as you told me. Get up, please. Sit and eat of my game that you may bless me. Apparently, Jacob was laying down, maybe on a couch or on a bed. And so he's telling him, get up, sit up, eat. Maybe, and even though Moses doesn't tell us this, perhaps Jacob tried to change his voice to sound like Esau, and it wasn't quite exactly like Esau's voice. So that's the reason why Isaac didn't pick up on it immediately, possibly, and say, you are not Esau, you're Jacob. Perhaps Jacob was trying to even disguise his voice and couldn't really get it exactly like it should be with Esau. Isaac said to his son, How is it that you have it so quickly, my son? Still suspicious. Did you do this so quickly? And he said, Because the Lord your God caused it to happen to me. Well, that's a lie on his part again, but in the big picture of it, providentially, it is the case. Because if you recall, at the birth of the two boys, Jacob had the heel of Esau as he was coming out. And it was foretold that the elder shall serve the younger. So everybody ought to have remembered that. So all of this is fulfilling God's plan, even though there was deception and even lies being told. It all works out for the fulfillment of God's plan. Then Isaac said to Jacob, Please come close that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. That tells me right there that Isaac still had major suspicions. I've got to make sure. Could it be, and this is my speculation, could it be that Isaac was fully aware of how devious Rebekah could be when she was given a chance? We're not told by Moses. That dynamic is not brought out. But there's something at work in Isaac's mind. He already is suspicious, and he wants to make sure about this. He did not, so Jacob came close to Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." Now think about this. Isaac hears the voice. He knows the voice of his two sons. So when he comes close and he's speaking, he says, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." That should have tipped him off. Well, he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. And he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" Still, even when he blessed him, he still got doubts. And he said, "I am," once again telling a flat lie. So he said, "Bring it to me, and I will eat of my son's game, that I may bless you." And he brought it to him, and he ate. He also brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Please come close and kiss me, my son." Still has suspicion. So he came close and kissed him. And when he smelled the smell of his garments, notice this. He's still suspicious. And then when he comes close to kiss him, he smells. He makes sure, is it the smell of Esau? Yes, it's the smell of Esau's clothes. He's got the hair of Esau. He just doesn't have the voice of Esau. He blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Now may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you." So it's done. The blessing is now given from Isaac to Jacob, with all of the legal and spiritual rights that pertain to it. It's done. Now it came about as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had hardly gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. You talk about missing it. I mean, we're talking right when he departed from that tent. Right after this, here comes Esau. I mean, Rebekah knew she needed to get this thing done in a hurry. And so it happens, and it's done. Then he also made savory food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." Isaac his father said to him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esau." The voice, there's no question about the voice. And notice the reaction. Then Isaac trembled violently. That's the way the New American Standard renders that. He trembled violently. Have you ever seen somebody shaking to the point where it's just all over? That's the way Jacob was, Isaac was just all over, trembling. And said, "Who was he then that hunted game and brought it to me, so that I ate of all of it before you came and blessed them? Yes, and he shall be blessed." When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." Picture the scene. Jacob's already gone out. Esau comes in. This takes place. And now when Esau realizes what Isaac had done, he just cries at the top of his voice. Perhaps it's more like an animalistic cry that he utters. Great emotion on Esau's part. And he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing Now, Isaac has forgotten what was said back in chapter 25. Remember what the Lord said to Rebekah? 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be separated from your body, and 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Isaac forgot what had been declared. He's stolen your blessing. Well, it's deceit, yes, that he utilized, but really, when you look at what was prophesied, and also realize that Esau had sold his birthright in the first place, it's right where it ought to be. So, notice, verse 36, then he said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. Watch this. He took away my birthright. No. Jacob didn't take his birthright. No, you can't say that. Esau claims that. That's not the truth. We saw what happened. Esau sold his birthright. He sold his birthright to Jacob, and he even said, what is that to me? Because I'm about to die of hunger. He didn't care anything about it at that point. It was a legal transaction. He did it with full knowledge, even though he didn't care about it. So he says, he's taken away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. He thought that the blessing was all that mattered. And the blessing, yes, was highly important. The blessing was indeed something that had legal ramifications, spiritual ramifications. But who did the blessing belong to? It belonged to the one with the birthright. See? What did Esau do? He sold his birthright. So who does the blessing belong to? Jacob. So even though Jacob uses deceit to get Isaac to bless him, when the big picture is observed, he's got what is rightfully his because of what Esau had done. The Hebrews writer talks about that, or Paul actually talks about Esau despised his birthright. Moses uses that same phrase to talk about that. Esau has done it already. He's done it to himself. All of this is done, yes, with deceit, and there's no pretty picture that's painted here by Moses about anybody. But still, Jacob has got what belongs to him. And it all works out for the plan of God in the long run. Now, notice. And he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? But Isaac replied to Esau, behold, I have made him your master, and all his relatives I have given to him as servants, and with grain and new wine I have sustained him. Now as for you then, what can I do, my son? Esau said to his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. So Esau lifted his voice and wept. Again, he's crying out with a great cry. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, behold, away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling, and away from the dew of heaven from above. Now, when you look at Esau's descendants, the Edomites settled in a dry and barren land, exactly as Isaac foretold. Notice further. By your sword you shall live, and your brother you shall serve, but it shall come about when you become restless, that you will break his yoke from your neck. And that's exactly what happened with the Edomites. The Edomites would be a constant thorn in the side of Israel and Judah. They would be subjugated by Israel and Judah initially, but then there would come periods of time throughout history where Edom would rise up and overthrow that yoke that they would have, that they would suffer with Israel and Judah. So this exactly happened as Jacob or as Isaac foretold. So Esau bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. That's dead serious. Esau has a murderous intent. It harkens back to Cain and Abel, doesn't it? Cain was so angry at his brother that he rose up and killed him. Well, you've got that same intent on Esau's part. Now, when the words of her elder son Esau were reported to Rebekah, somebody told her apparently of what Esau had said. She sent and called her younger son Jacob and said to him, Behold, your brother Esau is consoling himself concerning you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice and arise. Flee to Haran, to my brother Laban. You remember Laban from back in chapter 24? Abraham had dealings with Laban, so Laban's still living. Stay with him a few days until your brother's fury subsides. Just stay with him a few days. A few days turns out to be 20 years. He stays with Laban for 20 years. Have you ever known somebody to hold a grudge for a long period of time? Hatred for a long period of time? That's apparently what Esau harbored. And so this few days, let everything cool down, turns out to be 20 years. Until your brother's anger against you subsides, and he forgets what you did to him, then I will send and get you from there. Why should I be bereaved of you both in one day? Rebekah does not want Jacob to be murdered. Because if if Esau murdered Jacob, then Esau himself would be killed. As a result, she would lose both of her sons in one day. So she's saying, go to my family, stay there until everything dies down, then I'll send for you. Rebekah said to Isaac, I am tired of living because of the daughters of Heth. Now she's venting. A mom is going to vent to her son. She's venting about her son. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth like these, from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? She's venting to her husband about it. In other words, we've already got problems with Esau's wives. And if Jacob were to take wives of the daughters of Heth, I don't know if I could live. Well, she's got legitimate concerns about that. And she thinks that if he goes to where her kinfolk are, he can take a wife there, everything will be good on his part. Any questions, comments before we get into chapter 28? Yes, sir. Good question. I would suspect, even though Moses doesn't tell us, I would suspect that they were probably in their early 20s. That's a guess as far as Jacob and Esau are concerned. They're of age, and we would assume that would be 21 to receive a blessing. They're old enough to where Isaac is about to die, and they're already mature men. So we would assume at least 21, maybe a little bit older than that, possibly mid-20s at the oldest, I would think. They're still very young men, but that would be my guess. At least, maybe 60s. We're not really told. We're told later the age of Isaac, of course, when he passes, but still, yeah, that would be a good estimate. So maybe 60s, I would think. And Isaac would be older, so he'd probably be in his 70s at least, I would think. That's just, again, my guess. But so that gives you sort of a picture, of all these characters that are involved in this. And Isaac obviously has lost his sight. He can't see. That's the major factor in this whole story. He could not see. If he was able to see, they couldn't have gotten away with this. But because he wasn't able to see and his hearing was affected apparently, where his hearing wasn't clear, they were able to pull this off. And again, it works out according as God had said, even though there was deception involved. Good question, though. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Right. That's right. That's right. All you got to do is watch an episode of Dr. Phil. Y'all ever watch Dr. Phil? Some of those episodes get so crazy and so involved. And when you watch 2020, of course, Brenda and I watched Dateline and 2020. We're addicted to those shows, especially when they have the news stories about murders and all these kinds of things. It gets complicated, And automatically now when I hear about a murder case, I think husband, wife, they're involved because that's the way it always seems to be. And when you get all these family dramas wrapped into it, it gets crazy. And this is exactly what Moses is describing to us. He's describing to us an episode of Dateliner 2020 in our parlance. This is something that would fascinate an Israelite reading this. See, this is the story of my ancestors. They were human, just like my family's human. Just like me, I make mistakes. Here we see Jacob deceiving. You see what that does for an Israelite? An Israelite looks at this and he doesn't see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as far away supermen. We're not able to be anything like them. They see this that Moses writes and they say, you know what? I'm just like them. Isn't that what the Hebrews writer says in Hebrews 11? He describes all these heroes and heroines of faith by name. All of them, almost without exception, are described by Moses in the Old Testament as having some kind of negative characteristic. The major characters, I should say. And at the very end of that chapter, the Hebrews writer says, these all died in faith, not having received the promise. And then he puts in the kicker. God having promised something better for us. The kicker is that we today in the Christian age have something better than they did back then. So when we look at Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and the like, we don't look at them now, or we shouldn't look at them like, well, they're Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses. I'm just a Christian. No, no, no. You are in a far better situation spiritually than they ever were. That blows my mind. And it ought to blow your mind. That we are in better situation today than they were back then. They died in faith. What does that tell me? That tells me I can die in faith just like they did. And I can receive the promise of God. All of this fits together perfectly like a glove. Is that a good metaphor? I don't think it is. But anyway, chapter 28, 28, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. This is a general rule. You're not going to take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padanaram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and from there take yourself a wife from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. There's Laban mentioned again. He's going to be a major character coming up. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May He also give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and to your descendants with you, that you may possess the land of your sojournings, which God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padanaram to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. He's going to kinfolk, in other words. You know, the old saying, you can't go home again? Well, he can, because he's a descendant. He's not the ones who originally left. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob, sent him away to Padanaram to take to himself a wife from there, and that when he blessed him, he charged him, saying, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Padanaram. So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan displeased his father Isaac. He draws the correct conclusion here. And Esau went to Ishmael and married, besides the wives that he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth. So what is happening here? What's happening here is Esau is still trying to please his father. He's still trying to please his dad. Maybe this will get me some additional blessings. He's trying his best at this too late a date to get things for himself. Then Jacob departed from Beersheba and went toward Haran. We're going to see in the future, described by Moses, that Beersheba is the home for Jacob for several years, as it will turn out. He came to a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set. He probably had been on the road for about 2 to 3 days by this point. So he had to stop and rest. And he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and laid down in that place. Have you ever had a stone for a pillow? I never have. I can't imagine going to sleep with my head on a stone. But Jacob could, apparently. He had a dream. Now, dreams are vehicles for revelation, as we will see in the Bible, and that's the case here. And behold, a ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Jacob's ladder. We know the story, don't we? And the angels are ascending and descending. That's communion between God and man, between heaven and earth is being pictured here. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. Notice, please, the same blessing that was made originally to Abraham all the way back in chapter 12 is repeated right here to Jacob. And the kicker, and in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. The messianic promise is repeated to Jacob. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. God promises He will protect him. What does that tell an Israelite reading all this? Jacob was involved in deception. He told lies to his father. And yet God still made the promise to him. What does that tell you about God's grace? God's grace is massive. Even when we slip up, even when we make mistakes, God will still forgive us. We ought to be thankful for that. And the Israelite ought to have been thankful for that when he read this. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Jacob, deep in his heart, was devoted to the Lord. In spite of all his flaws, and there were many, he had a deep and abiding reverence for Almighty God. It struck him at this moment. So, Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on its top. This stone is a memorial stone that he's setting up, and the oil being poured on it indicates an act of worship. He's actually worshiping God in so doing. He called the name of that place Bethel. Bethel means the house of God. Bethel, house of God. Elohim is what the El would stand for. Beth being house, El, Elohim, house of God. However, previously the name of the city had been Luz. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. This stone, which I have set up as a pillar, will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. He intends for this memorial to be a permanent memorial. This is going to be something that will be perpetual. Not only for me, but this place will be perpetual. That's what he intends. He still wants to serve the Lord. So, I want us to get in chapter 29 at least part of the way, because this to me is one of the more humorous incidents that Moses describes here. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. That's Mesopotamia he's describing. He looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it, for from that well they watered the flocks. Now the stone of the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, they would then roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. That makes sense. The stone would keep the water from evaporating and would also control the amount of water that would be used. So it's a very smart practice that they're doing. Jacob said to them, my brothers, where are you from? And they said, we're from Haran. He said to them, do you know Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And he said to them, is it well with them? And they said, is it well? Here is Rachel, his daughter, coming with the sheep. Just like anybody comes back home, who are you? Where are you from? Do you know so-and-so? Well, yes, I do. Well, that's what's going on here. He said, behold, it is still high day. Is it not time for the livestock to be gathered? Water the sheep and go pasture them. But they said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered. And they roll the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, watch this. Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. So Rachel comes in as he's talking. Now watch what Jacob does. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. This boy is smitten. This boy, love at first sight. The bells and whistles and the violins playing. He's struck with Rachel. And so he's going to do something to impress her. So he himself rolls that stone. That tells me Jacob is a lot stronger than we have assumed. Jacob is a strong guy. He rolls that stone by himself. He's going to impress this girl. Maybe the adrenaline was pumping too. He rolls that stone. Then, for good measure, he goes and kisses her, which is a kiss of greeting, but it's a little bit more than that because he lifted his voice and wept. That ought to tell Rachel, he's interested. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. This is overwhelming for her, obviously. So when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him. And by the way, the Hebrew text here indicates that he kissed Jacob repeatedly. It was not just it was repeatedly. Got a kinfolk that comes all the way from Canaan over here. Then he related to Laban all these things. Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. You're my kin. You're my kinfolk. And he stayed with him a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? He apparently been working for him all this time. Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Now, we're not told exactly in detail what Moses means by this. How were Leah's eyes weak? We can only speculate. It somehow affected her facial features. And Rachel didn't have that. But Leah, her name means gazelle. Rachel's name means ewe, E-W-E, ewe. So there's a difference there even in the names that were given them. Now Jacob loved Rachel. So he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. So the agreement is, at least Laban thinks, I serve him for 7 years and I get to marry Rachel. Well, Laban's got other plans. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Oh, I'm going to marry the girl of my dreams is nothing. Serve him for 7 years, piece of cake. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her. It's time. I'm going to marry her. We've got to go through the ceremony. We've got to go through all the festivities. Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now, this again, in connection with ancient Near East custom, this feast lasts full 7 days. It lasts a full week, and it's part of the marriage and part of the celebration. So this is part of the official, the legal festivities as well as the celebratory festivities. Now, in the evening, notice this now, this is very important. In the evening, it's night, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob went into her. Now, you say, how could he should have known this was Leah. 2 things. The bride, during this full week of celebration, was veiled from head to foot. You could not see her face. That was part of the festivities. So Leah was veiled completely where Jacob couldn't see her face, and apparently she didn't ever speak where he could hear her voice. Also, it was from the time the feast began until the time of the consummation. And in addition to this, it's at nighttime. So if it's at night, the light is not going to be as good where Jacob can't see. You see what's about to take place here? Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. New American Standard Bible says, behold, it was Leah with an exclamation point. That's because the Hebrew text, the way that Moses writes this, it's funny when you think about it. In the morning, surprise, behold, it's Leah. He wakes up and he's expecting to see Rachel's face. It's Leah. That's a shock. That's almost from a sitcom, isn't it? Well, that's the way Moses intended for this to be. And he said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me? Ah, Jacob the deceiver has met his match, has he not? Notice this. But Laban said, it is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Well, that's true, but it would have been a help for Jacob to know this going in, wouldn't it? Laban chose not to reveal that piece of information to Jacob going into this thing. Well, notice this. Complete the week of this one, of Leah, and we will give you the other also, Rachel, for the service which you shall serve with me for another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week of festivities. And he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. So in other words, this week would be for Rachel. The other week was for Leah. Now he's given her Rachel in addition. Laban also gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. There's that weakness in that family. The perpetual weakness in this family is to show favoritism, whether it's to sons, daughters, or wives. And indeed, he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for another 7 years. He serves for Rachel after he's married. Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben. Reuben means, look, a son. For she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard, that word in the Hebrew is Shema, that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon, which is a form of the word Shema, by the way. You see the similarities here? She conceived again and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will come attached. That word is Lava in the Hebrew. Because I had borne him 3 sons, therefore he was named Levi, which is a form of the word Lava. That's where they get that word. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. That word praise is from the Hebrew Hodah. Therefore she named him Judah, which is a form of the word Hodah. Then she stopped bearing. We wonder, where did they get these names? Right there. Hebrew language. The Hebrew language is so descriptive, and the English language doesn't really do it justice. The English translations, by and large, doesn't do it justice to bring out all the nuances and all the complexities. But this right here highlights it. It's crazy when you think about it, but it's great that the Lord chose languages for the Bible that brings out so much when you delve into it deeply. It's just fantastic. At least it is to me. I'm a geek about language anyway. Chapter 30 is where we're